I think I see a lot of obsessive compulsive behaviors associated with the hyperstimulation that we're kind of seeing, in difficulty in down regulating our emotions and senses connected to that. And it's just inability to kind of let go of the idea that you need to be doing something constantly and not doing nothing.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. When I get lost in clinic, I go back to basics. What am I looking at? Excess or deficiency? That's my touchstone. There is this common idea that symptoms show up in the weak places. Patients mention this all the time when blaming a particular portion of their anatomy for the troubles that it has. But I suspect the Shen is more intelligent than that. I'm thinking these days that it's worth considering that stress, pain, trauma, difficulties, they get stored in the areas of strength. They're put into the parts of the physiology or emotional matrix where there is strength enough to contain the problem. What gets called the weak spot, it might actually be a strong point. It's where the body-mind is capable enough to act as storage for some kind of physical trauma or undigested psychoemotive material. It's not the weak spot that things go to. It's the trustworthy storage container that reliably holds and allows for emotional habits and predilections to continue. Patients come in and talk about the weak spot, the rock-hard lump in their shoulders where they store their stress, the way their abdomen tightens with emotions that are stuffed down, or how their back gets fussy with the support they give to others but not to themselves. We as practitioners often enough think that way too. I know I have. I think of how my lungs are my, air quotes here, weak link when I've overdone it, that it's the first organ system to show wear and tear. Recently, I've begun to wonder if I had it the wrong way around, that people don't only show symptoms in areas of weakness, they also show symptoms in areas of strength. This is the crux of being able to discern excess or deficiency, because indeed, both give rise to the troubles that bring people through your doors. It's just that it takes a seasoned and discerning eye to be able to differentiate between the two. That the weak spot people talk about, maybe it's actually a strong spot. Just because an area has symptoms, it doesn't mean it's weak or deficient. It might be strong and capable, just overloaded. Our work is to be able to reliably be able to make that distinction. Being able to discern excess from deficiency, have the clarity of perspective to differentiate problems of too much from the problems of too little. It's a mainstay of East Asian medicine and a principle that scales helpfully into other areas of life. This, along with an eye towards the opportunities and challenges of growing through a cycle of development, are, I think, two key aspects of diagnosis that are reliably helpful. In this conversation with Moshe Heller, we explore the essential dynamic of development as one of the key aspects of treating kids. Understanding cycles of growth and development, that helps you to craft a treatment that works with the forces of nature as they naturally unfurl. When working with kids, it helps when you understand the landscape. It's helpful when working with adults as well. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AccuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lyle, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com, and where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AcuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit acufastneedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
Moshe Heller, welcome to Qiological.
Hello. Yes. Nice to be here. Happy that we've finally sitting down and talk, and happy that we're doing it.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. We've known each other for a few years, passed each other at conferences, had a little chit-chat here and there. One of those things like, hey, let's get together for lunch. And then, a long time goes by before you get lunch.
Absolutely, yes.
So here we are.
You are in this lunch.
We're having lunch. It's kind of a digital, a little lunch around the digital campfire.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So I've been looking forward to talking to you because you work a lot with kids.
Yes, I do.
And, I'm of an age, and many people I know are of an age. Maybe we've had kids, or we've been connected with kids, or we're just old enough to think, kids these days, what are you going to do with them?
Yeah.
So different treating a younger generation.
Yeah, I think, first of all, one of the reasons I was attracted to treating children is that they actually respond better than us adults. And so you actually you don't have to work as hard to get good results. So I was always very it was great to treat children. I always got good results, so it was good. But it's become, generally, I think raising children nowadays has become a little more complicated and complex than in the past. So, I think I always sort of imagine us growing up as our parents sort of threw us out to the world and we kind of managed on our own. But today, this is not as happening as much. I think there's much more of the parents involved in the growth and development and the life of the children. So it's become more complex, yeah.
I think so. I was recently looking at some photos of when I was a kid. And it's always, not always, but like often enough, it's like me and my brother and some friends, people around the neighborhood. There's these like gangs of kids that we used to run around with. And I remember during the pandemic, this was very, it's one of those things where I hadn't noticed it until I noticed that it wasn't there. During the pandemic, kids would, in groups, like go cruising through the neighborhood on their bicycles, like we did as kids. Before the pandemic, they weren't doing that. I guess they were at their classes or they were doing some enrichment activity or some supervised whatever. But during the pandemic, we'd have like neighborhood kids, like a flock of kids running around what I remember was like to be a kid.
Yes, that's exactly the idea. I remember that too. My parents didn't take me to school. I'd either walk or take a bus or,
No, that's right.
It was not something that people did. But today, when my kids were growing up, I did take them to school because everybody else did. That's what everybody did. So, and when I asked my daughter to sort of take a bicycle or walk to school, she kind of shrugged and said, what are you talking about? That's not something we do. But so that's, I think, it's very different.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you think happened?
I think there's kind of a few things that happen. It's always we try to blame one thing, but in reality, also when we make diagnoses, it's a complex or a connection of a few things that happened. Number one, I think it started with safety. There was a concern about safety that wasn't as much when I was growing up. It used to be sort of like a very safe areas that I grew up, at least. And, and everybody was outside and it was considered more safe. So I think there was few safety changes so that the idea was that it wasn't as safe to send children on their own to go to school. That's number one. Number two, there's a general idea that there was an idea that kids that if you let them hang out and not give them structure, they'll get into trouble. And so I think generally in society, there's less and less time of this kind of let them. And I saw a huge change in my kids, even in the breaks that we're giving, how when I grew up, there was always this kind of break in the middle of the day, between classes where you have time to just hang out, it's not any classwork or anything like this. And my kids had only a few minutes between classes. They had to run between classes. And at a certain stage, they usually had lunch break, which was about an hour. And they said, the administration decided to cut it into half an hour because it was a waste of time.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I think there's a lot of this idea of, that we need to keep them within, some kind of a framework. Otherwise, it's problematic.
This is so interesting. I think about that safety thing. Look, I'm not advocating for going back to when I was a kid and we rode bicycles without any helmets or any protective gear at all. I'm not advocating for that.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this. When you learn to ride a bicycle and you're not wearing a helmet, and it's pretty clear that falling off your bike hurts like hell.
Yes.
There are some things you don't do on your bicycle.
Exactly.
Like in terms of safety, let me put it this way. I wouldn't call him a friend, but like a neighborhood person that was like part of the group we hung out in. And I think he broke his arm 2 or 3 times in one summer. I mean, he's just like, he did crazy stuff.
Yes. Yes.
And the lesson for me was like the things he's doing with his bicycle, don't do that if you don't want your arm broken.
Right. Yes.
And did I get called, a wuss and chicken? Yeah, I did, but I figured I was smarter than that idiot. So it's like, again, I see it, I'm putting my experience on it, but there's something about when you have to learn to self-regulate and you look at the environment around you. And I think our parents trusted us to like work that stuff out because I think it was even rougher in their day.
Right. And you use the term self-regulating, and I think that emotional regulation is a big issue now. I don't know if you know, it's a lot of discussion about self-emotional regulation, and that's how it's lacking and it's causing a lot of anxiety in children today. But I think it has to do with stimulation. So, and the word boredom, right? So when we grew up, we didn't have the phones, and at least we had, at least me, I didn't have a lot of TV screen, even TV time. When I grew up in Israel, there was 2 hours of TV, and that's about it. In the U.S., I know there's been more, but children preferred sometimes going up than watching TV.
Mm-hmm. We used to do that. I remember doing that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is that is very important to understand is when we expose children or when they are in front of a screen is a stimulant. Okay? So, and the stimulation that's coming from the screen is much, much more intense. So if you ever look at a movie from the 80s or the 70s, they look so boring. Like, I remember watching, if you rewatch, the first Star Wars, whatever, it actually looks, compared to today's Star Wars, it actually is boring. But I remember it being so exciting and so invigorating. So the question is, the more we get stimulated, everything else becomes everything below it not as stimulating becomes boring. And we feel that we constantly need to be stimulated, and that really interferes with this kind of regulation of our emotions and our senses. So our emotions and our senses are very much connected. I think they're not separate, right? As we know. So sensory stimulation, whether it's through your eyes, through your ears, through your skin, is something that is regulated the same as our emotions. If we are feeling very sad, we can regulate it and shift it to the next emotion, right? But if we get stuck in it, it perpetuates and becomes more intense. And so I think kids nowadays and I think that ties into many, many aspects of this kind of exterior stimulation, whether it's the screen, the foods that we are consuming. A lot of these kids eat sugar in a very high amount, and that I think is part of that stimulation, and it becomes, anything less than that becomes boring, right? So that you tend to eat more of the same, and that ties into that kind of stimulation. And in the end, we get a hyper-stimulated child, which branches into many of the issues that many of them are presenting, whether it's anxiety, whether it's ADD or ADHD, whether it's our immune system being hyper-reactive to cause, for example, allergies, right? Allergy is the way.
Which are ridiculous these days.
Yes. And so,
I mean, it's just exploded in the amount and types and severity.
and it all ties to this kind of stimulation that begins at birth, right? So it begins right away when the child is born. And and in many cases, it starts if the child is not given breast milk, then formula is much more stimulating than breast milk.
Now, how is that?
It's sweeter, and it actually is a very heavy in terms of the problem was that in the past there were issues with formula that didn't provide for enough vitamins and minerals that caused issues with children. I don't know if you're familiar with that history, but
I am not familiar with it.
so there was a lawsuit, and at that point they said, okay, if there's not enough, we're going to do extra. And so formula is much richer in the vitamins and minerals and fats and everything that baby might need, except for the things he really needs, and that is breast milk.
And so I think where you're headed with this is from formula to screens to other sorts of inputs.
Right, and immunizations,
Like the system is getting upregulated
right,
and it doesn't come back down.
correct. It's hard to get down.
And it can show up as ADHD, it can show up as allergies, it can show up as anxiety.
So I think that we're looking at allergies, for example. We can't ignore that this doesn't come from, especially when we're seeing it more and more in the society. It's not coming from the individuals. It's coming from the environment that's affecting the individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why it's sometimes a little more complex to treat those situations, because it means that we need to help the parents change the environment that the child is being immersed in. And that's sometimes a little more difficult.
100%. I mean, you mentioned this yourself about going to school. You walked, you took a bus. I did the same thing. When I got a little older, I could ride a bicycle on the side of the road. No bike paths. It was gravel, no helmet. These days, parents would have their children taken away from them.
Yes.
For allowing them to do what I did to get myself to high school.
Correct.
Which is
yes,
really,
absolutely.
I mean, it's interesting. Back to that safety thing. And, that looks at, I mean, that speaks to the milieu and like the zeitgeist of a time that people grow up in. Your daughter said, well, take me to school. Everybody else is. It's like, how do you not, like as a parent,
right?
How do you not get caught up in that?
It's very difficult, and it's part of this whole thing. And in schools, you kind of part of a group, so it's very individual. If you're different, it's very difficult to come out. So eventually I decided there are other institutions, by the way, that provide for different types of environment, if you want to call it. Not the mainstream. So I moved my daughter from public school to another system called the Waldorf School Education. I don't know if you're familiar with Rudolf Steiner's theory. And in any case, that philosophy is about being close to nature and having times that you're playing outside, no matter what the weather is. So they had an hour outside each day throughout, from preschool to all the way down up to the end of high school. They have an hour outside every day just to be outside.
Regardless of weather.
Yes, no matter the weather. Yes, there's a saying in that school, it's not the weather, it's how you're dressed. So it's all a matter of how you're dressed. If you're dressed well, you can go outside in all weathers, which is amazing. I think that's Well, in in schools that are within the environment of urban schools it's harder. I mean, I'm in the suburban school area, so it's easier. And this particular school is all about having a lot of nature and gardening and growing vegetables and other plants, which is kind of amazing also.
Yep, there's your biology class.
Mm-hmm. And also, another very interesting concept of this school and of Rudolf Steiner's education is a very interesting idea that ties into the ADHD issue. Is that he believed that when a child is developing at the beginning, where let's say kindergarten or preschool, these ages, the most important thing to work on development is fine motor skills.
Fine motor skills.
Yes, fine motor skills, as opposed to teaching concepts of reading and writing. So I don't know if you know it, but today in kindergarten, they're already starting to teach kids how to read and write. In the world of education, it's not done only after second or third grade. They focus on developing all kinds of techniques of fine motor skills like knitting and sewing and doing all kinds of artwork with little pieces, beading, for example. And so the idea is if you develop that fine motor skills, then reading and writing should be almost automatic. But if you don't have that, it's like you don't have the baseline. The pyramid is upside down.
This is interesting, Moshe. As you're talking about this, I'm just kind of imagining myself into being, a preschool kid.
Yeah. Yes.
Because I was one once. So I can still kind of imagine it a bit, right? But imagining doing some fine motor skill kind of thing and what that does to your attention, which it really brings your attention down to a focal point here in the present. You have to be embodied in your body to do fine motor skills. Your attention has to come like in and down.
Absolutely. And that's not done enough in order to prepare to be able to understand something and bring your motor skills to the hand to write.
Yes.
That's something that we need to develop.
So it's very embodying in a sense. Whereas learning to read, and look, I love to read.
Yes.
But that takes you more up and out.
Right. And you're able to do that much better if you have the baseline. I'll call it the baseline. It's sort of like as if we can kind of imagine the pyramid, right? So if you start by reading and you don't have the motor skills, the fine motor skills, then it becomes much more difficult because that upload,
which might explain some dyslexia and things of that nature.
Yes. So exactly. So in the Waldorf schools, there is much less of that, significantly less than in the kids who go through public school programs.
Wow. I'm thinking through my Chinese medicine mind as you describe this, the fine motor skills, the bringing of attention in and down. Mm-hmm. That's a very in type activity.
Correct. There's too much yang, not enough yin. And that's
just true of kids in general, which is why they heal so fast.
True of our society in general, yeah.
Yeah.
Too much too quickly and really not enough of that kind of yin activities, right? If we look at our sleep, right, which is our utmost yin activity, it is getting bombarded, or it's getting, we have light, we don't wind down towards yin, we actually just try to do as much as we can throughout the day, and then we close the light and we need to go to, we're young, and then we have to move into yin. A lot of people, that is part of their whole sleep issues, right? That come, then I'm seeing so many kids with sleep issues because they just cannot. This kind of idea of winding down it's not in our society. It's not in our nature. I mean, it's in our nature, but it's not how we are being educated.
It's in our nature, yeah. Well, and it's weird thinking about kids not being able to sleep. I mean, that should just be like the most natural thing.
Right. And I've had now kids that are, having sleep issues more than I've ever had in my practice, and I've been seeing kids for a while, but it's never been a huge issue. But now it is. I have a case of, it ties into also this, I think I see a lot of obsessive compulsive behaviors associated with that hyperstimulation that we're kind of seeing, in difficulty and down regulating our emotions and senses connected to that. And it's just inability to kind of let go of the idea that you need to be doing something constantly and not doing nothing.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code physiological for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. This is one of the great benefits I had in growing up, and you too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we
didn't have that avenue. I mean, people sit down with their phone and scroll as a way, air quotes here, to relax.
Right.
But that's not relaxing. That is further stimulation.
Absolutely. Yes. We have to remember that screens are stimulants, and they're stimulants just like drugs are. It's addicting. There is an addiction of that, these screens. You can get, kids get addicted to those screens in the same way that they're addicted to any other stimulant.
And we adults are too. And we probably model that for the kids. Well, look, and how many kids these days, instead of getting a toy, they get a pad put in front of them.
Exactly. Yes. And even, I think the toys have evolved. The toys I grew up were very simple. They weren't very as complex as they are. And that's the interesting thing. One of the things that Rudolf Steiner also mentions about, talks about toys, especially in the younger ages, is that they have to be so simple. Like even dolls should be just the shape of the doll, but no eyes or hair or anything. It's just a shape that you have to, as a child, you need to stimulate your imagination to fill in the blanks, rather than we are filling the blanks for you.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I think about screens, I think about what I see on screens, I think about, the vividness and the color and the clarity. There's nothing left in the imagination.
Correct. It's not your imagination. You're getting somebody else's imagination. being put into you, right? And then you become lazy because you look at a doll or something that has nothing or just a square, and you can't see other than that anything.
I don't think I would call it lazy. I would say that they have been deprived of the opportunity to develop that kind of capacity.
Correct.
They're not lazy.
Right.
I don't think kids are lazy.
Right.
I think for the most part, humans in general aren't lazy.
No, lazy is
But we've missed something in development.
absolutely. We miss a lot in development, and sometimes you don't only miss it, but you get stunted, meaning that it deprives you from moving on. It's because I think development, from the word development means that you're building on something on top of another, on top of another. You're developing. You're not, you have to go through steps. It's like, the idea that you need to crawl before you can walk. You can't, if you miss the crawling, then your walking will always be interfered to some extent, right? Do you know about that theory? Same as here, I think. It's associated with this idea that if we miss this idea of building our own imagination, we're missing a building block that it's very difficult to re-put it inside later on in life.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I remember studying some psychology when I was in college, and at least the classes I took, they would review some of the different developmental theories. Right? There's like Piaget, and there's Ericksonian, and there, Jungian. I mean, there's plenty of models. There's a lot of models. Like choose one and explore it, right? But all the models have this in common. They all say that exactly what you just said. There's a process. There's pieces that you need. You need to complete one level of development before you get to really embrace the next level of development. And if you don't get that, then you're hobbled throughout the rest of development.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And I think the thing is, though, also that our development is a little bit like Lego, right? So it's like there's little pieces of Lego, it's like our imagination needs to develop in a certain way. Our physical structure needs to be developed in a certain way. Our immune system needs to be developed in a certain way. And our social interaction needs to be developed in a certain way. And so,
man, you sound like a Chinese doctor.
Yeah. So we have all these Legos, and they need to come one after another, and so there's the first layer that has to be one piece of Lego that has to be your social interactions and how that happens. Second one has to be the physical development and how that happens, and your emotional development, and your immune development. All these little blocks need to create a first layer, and then on top of them another layer of each one of them, and eventually we build more and more. So these are really, so it's actually, when you think about it, it's quite complex, because we'll be feeding our kid great food. It's all organic. We grow, let's say we don't buy from the store, and we grow it all in a garden, and we make a big variety, and food is fantastic. But maybe that actually there's not enough, the social piece is missing, and that creates an issue of itself, an issue within itself. So do you understand? It's like there's all these blocks that we're building, and we have to sort of kind of address a variety, or check each one of those and see where the kid is.
Yes, because a weakness in any of them, a deficiency in any of them will hinder.
Can affect others, and there's some that are more influential.
The rest of it, yeah.
Because, for example, your immune development is something that can affect your nervous system and therefore can affect your emotional system, right? So we always talk in pediatrics about it's a triangle of our neuro, gastro, immune. That's three things. So the digestive system, our neurological system, and our immune system are interlocked. There are three angles of the same triangle, right? So there are three important pieces. And so each one, an imbalance in each one of those can affect the other two. So I think that one of the things that we've kind of missed is that we didn't realize that a kid needs to be sick as part of growing up. And we always try that our kids won't get sick. And by doing that, we're actually not letting their immune system grow and develop, because our immune system learns by being sick, we need to support the body so the sickness doesn't get out of hand. But it is actually a very important part of, and not through immunizations. Immunizations are a hindrance, I believe. They hinder our ability to actually learn as we should, right? So, of course, there are certain diseases we don't want to actually experiment with being exposed to them. But there are ones that we should, for example, the flu is something that the kid we need to get a flu in order for you to be able to understand the virus and kind of develop. Your immune system develops faster and is smarter than any lab somewhere, and that develops all these immunizations against the flu and calculations, etc., etc. Our immune system is really allows a strengthening and improvement of the immune system. And when we don't have that, we can get sick much more severely and deeply, I think.
That's I've thought about this myself over the years, especially like during the years that I practiced medicine. Like anytime I get sick, there's a part of me that's like, oh, damn it, I'm in bed for a few days and I feel awful. And there's a part of me that's watching the illness process, like as an observer, as a practitioner, It's like, maybe I can learn something from this. And one of the things that I have found over time is that when I'm sick, instead of trying to treat it, like I'm going to get ahead of this and I'm a practitioner and I should be able to make this thing not happen. Sometimes I'll get sick, it's got me. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to sleep for 3 days. At the end of that period of time, I often feel like something came out of me. I mean, you can get lingering issues, and I've had those, usually when I didn't rest enough. But it's also possible to feel more robust and stronger after an illness if you let it run its course.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm pointing towards, and that people understand. So an illness is an opportunity to learn not only how to fight the disease, but how your body functions and improve on it. So I think Chinese medicine got it right in a sense that the idea is not so much to fight. So it's not about killing the virus or the bacteria or whatever you're fighting, but actually support the body in its ability to push it out or resolve it in the way that it should be resolved, depending on where it's located within your body. And that enables your body to actually function much more in a harmonious way. So I think that is something that we shouldn't really miss. And it's very easy to fall into that slippery slope of being, there's a virus, we need to kill it, right? We need to kill the virus. That's our goal. No, that's not our goal. Our goal is to support the soldiers that will kill the virus. If we don't support the soldiers that kill the virus, and we kill the virus, then the soldiers kind of say, okay, they get, if we kind of imagine it, they'll be, okay, what shall we do? Oh, maybe we'll attack our body, something else, and we need to do something. But it also brings a very important aspect of Chinese medicine, which I think we should always remember, is that when we are observing, when what we learn from Chinese medicine, I think a very important aspect is that we are concerned about relationships and not about absolute things. Chinese medicine is looking at relationships. So it's not when we say, somebody has a wind cold, that is the relationship between the wind, the cold, and the person, right? That's what we're observing. It really doesn't matter if it's a virus or a bacteria or whatever it is. It's how it manifests, how that relationship manifests within that particular person. That's the concern of Chinese medicine. But in our Western thinking, it's very difficult to get away from that because we're immediately, let's see if it's a streptococcus or if it's, or it's a virus or RSV or is it corona? And if it is, I need to kind of find herbs that kill it, right? And it doesn't matter if the person is, hot and sweaty or cold and shivery. I need herbs that kill the virus. And that's not Chinese medicine. That's Western thinking.
It's not even remotely Chinese medicine. Yeah. This is so interesting. I've made this mistake. I'm sick or someone else is sick and I want to take care of them. I want them to feel better as soon as possible, right? I want to get rid of the problem. And it's very easy to fall into that. And we want people to feel better. But as we're having this conversation right now, and as you point out, and it's like I already know it, I just needed to be reminded that it's about strengthening and supporting the body in such a way as it's expressing itself so that it can be more regulated, not to get rid of and kill the thing, but to become capable enough that it's naturally going to be able to take care of it. In some ways, it's a learning experience. It's not an affliction. It's kind of an assignment.
Exactly. Yes. Amazing. Yeah, that's exactly. I think that's the beauty of our body. We have the potential, right, to really fight disease in quite severe diseases. Our immune system is quite amazing in that sense. But we, I think in Western medicine, we don't trust it enough, and we don't give it a chance.
I think there is that. And, for sure, there are some things that are just really nasty pathogens. And actually, microbial murder, it's a great idea.
Yes. No,
if someone is swarming over your border unstoppably,
yeah,
and you're really sick as a result, okay, yeah, there's a place for that. It really requires some nuance, doesn't it?
Absolutely. No, I'm right. It also, there's antibiotic is a great tool that we don't need to think that it's all bad. No, it's bad when we use it irresponsibly or overuse or use when it's not needed, and that's part of understanding the disease process. So if there is extreme heat and dampness, for example, then antibiotic might be a good, because it's bitter and cold, it will drain the damp and clear the heat, and it's fantastic. And we just need to make sure, and so a lot of times I just support the body through that process, because after giving cold, bitter medicinals, we need to somehow protect the spleen, especially in children, right? Because that's their weak spot. And so the question is, if we can do that, then antibiotics are, could be a great tool to use at times. The difficulty begins when we have things that are, let's say, cold and damp, and then we give antibiotics. And then that can actually, cause more cold and damp and weakening of the spleen. And then it kind of creates a spiral of issues.
Moshe, it can be so tricky with these external illnesses. So on one hand, you can look at the books and you can look at some of the basic rubrics that we use. Is it hot and sweaty, or like cold and dry and shivering? Can't sweat, right? Is it Guizhi? Is it Mahuang? Is it some kind of Wenbing thing? And these are wonderful ideas, and they're like really cool. But actually knowing what you're seeing in the moment when it's happening, it can be really tricky.
That's very tricky. Absolutely. And it's also the situations where you might be seeing your patients. I see a lot of kids, and a lot of times I don't see the kid. The mother is calling and say, my son has so-and-so and he has fever and he's, or vomiting, or he has a sore throat, or he has an earache or whatever. And I need to, it's not that I can do the whole evaluation. Sometimes it's just a phone call. Because I stress, and I think even for adults, we don't stress enough that the important time to get treated is when you're ill, not when you're well. I mean, in terms of external treatments, right? I'm not talking about illness, like more chronic illnesses, but the right time, we have the famous saying, a wind is a cause of 10,000 diseases, right? The idea is that if we treat the cold, the wind in the exterior, we prevent serious diseases later on in life. So that's a very important concept, I think, to teach our, especially if you're treating pediatric patients, teach the parents, like, if you see signs of an illness, don't ignore it. You have to immediately treat it to support the body so that it will be a good learning experience as opposed to a bad learning experience. So we have to address it immediately and change maybe how they're eating, and maybe give them some more support or some herbs that will help to resolve whatever is missing. So I usually encourage parents saying, if something's not right, and don't hesitate to call me or text me so I know how to start the treatment right away, and I'll give you that right advice. So parents know to call when children are beginning to get sick. And I don't remember how we got to that.
This again touches on a developmental model, doesn't it? In that this touches on development again. In this case, it's some kind of challenge to the body. And if you can resolve it well, then the body doesn't have to carry it forward.
Right, absolutely. And there's quite amazing observations in our Chinese medicine that were done by, like, for example, I don't know if you know, Sun Si Miao has a book on pediatrics. Sabine Williams.
I've heard of it. He's got one on gynecology too, as I recall.
Right, but Sabine actually translated in 2 books. It's called Venerating the Root, and he talks about something very interesting, that in the process of children growing up, at the beginning years, there are two kinds of, he calls it steamings and ventings. So it's like these heat episodes that come, and that's part of normal growth and development. And so that he says that even a child in these periods, if they're going through steaming, we should not really subdue the heat. We should let it resolve by itself. And he commends of not treating it. And he, there's descriptions of how to recognize it and how to know, and what ages, and and when it appears, so that it's a steaming rather than something going on.
So there are some things that would look like a pathological situation that are actually
correct,
not pathological. They're just
physiological.
A difficult moment of development that's natural.
No, it's not even difficult. It's part of the process. So if you can think about it, in Chinese medicine generally, when things are developing, the process of transformation creates heat. And we see that in many, many places, right? For example, when children are growing their teeth. And so when a tooth comes out, it's not abnormal to have fever, but it's not a fever because they have a pathogen necessarily. It's their internal process, right? And once the tooth comes out, the fever goes away, everything's fine. And we see that in many. And so he says that sometimes children, I don't know if you've ever observed children grow, but they'll grow in bursts, like suddenly. There'll be days where they become more ravenous in terms of their food, their hunger. They eat more, and they suddenly, you wake up, and then, your son, your child grew an inch. And then there's a week, then they don't grow. They don't grow incrementally, slowly. It's not this kind of slow development. It's usually boom, few days of growth, and then calming down for a second, and then boom, another growth. So there's these patterns. If you observe, that's what Sun Si Miao really paid attention to, is these kind of bursts of growth, which are part of this kind of normal development and growth of children. And as part of that process, is that growth brings a lot of yang to be released, right? And it comes out as heat or fever. It happens, I call it, usually, in our society, we call it the terrible twos. Do you know that stage? Heard about that?
Oh, yes.
So the terrible twos are a period, I call it the febrile time. A lot of times what happens is, at this stage, 2 years and on, between 2 and 3, there's a lot of things coming out. A lot of the molars are coming out, which are this kind of big teeth, which produce a lot of heat as being part of the process. There's a burst of growth. At 2 years of age. And there's a lot of development. Suddenly you start moving and standing, and you start speaking. It's a huge shift in development that happens at the age of 2. And for some reason, it's a very young, and as we say, the bigger the kidney yang is, so if the bigger the child with bigger yang will have a more difficulty. Parents will suffer more because they'll be more resistant. They'll explore the word no, and they'll know to resist. And so it's a very interesting age between 2 and 3 that is important. So, and that I also teach a course with Dr. Stephen Cowan, and he developed with Ephraim Korngold, the idea that what we call the developmental spiral. So that at each age there's a different element that's being developed. So, for example, we're born into water, right? The water time, which brings up the question, and that's the first year of life, right? That's who am I, right? The question of existence coming into life, right? And then the next phase after water comes wood, right? So the second year of life is that kind of has that woody nature, right? This kind of bursting outwards.
There's your terrible twos.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So I think it all fits together, and it's beautiful to see these kind of these processes, right, that we're seeing, right, and we're experiencing, but how they intertwine into the theory of Chinese medicine, the 5 element theory, and also just the physiological development theory.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner. Because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital qi. And that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of chi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
When I think about Western models of development that I've been exposed to, they often seem quite linear.
Yes.
Right? It's like you got to do this level, and then you go to the next level, and you go to the next level. What I think is wonderful about looking through, say, the motion of the 5 phases and the cycle of the 5 phases, it's not linear. And so there comes a time where maybe we miss something at one level of development for whatever reason, but we come around to it.
Right.
And I suspect we get another shot at working that stuff through. Does that make sense?
Right. No, absolutely. That's part of what we're actually advocating, and to look at that, because it's an amazing, because at adulthood, if we see the spiral and we understand that we're revisiting that same point, let's say some trauma happened at the age of 2, the wood phase. So every time the wood phase will come back in that spiral going up, that's when it would come up. And that's also where you might have an opportunity to fix it, to re-regulate it at that period of time. And we see that a lot with emotional issues, especially that they do tend to have this cyclical, and I'm sure that a lot of times we can figure out that it actually is following that spiral in terms of how it progresses.
This is interesting. I have patients sometimes, they'll come in, they've got something going on. They say, I've got this problem. I haven't had this problem for a long time. I remember having it some time ago. I thought I had it taken care of, but it seems like I didn't get it taken care of because I'm still dealing with it. And I hadn't thought about this, but I'm wondering, wow, well, now I'm thinking about it. I wonder where they are on the cycle. What is the turning of the cycle in terms of years and seasons?
It starts by the first year of life is the water, and then the second sort of year of life is wood, and then it progresses. Third year is third, and this is not sort of, some children have longer phases, and we also have to look at the constitution of that child. And so they may stay longer at their constitutional, phase, right? And it might take them longer, but generally,
We like to feel like we're at home.
yes, exactly. So it starts, first year is water, second year is wood, third year is fire, and then fourth year is earth, and then fifth, sixth year closes the cycle of with metal, and then we come back to 7, 8, right, as being the water again, right? And 7, 8 water again, then maybe 14, 16 again water. Do you see that? So as it spirals, it goes through the whole cycle again and comes back to water every time.
Wow, that's really something to look at. That's something to consider. I mean, not just for children, but for people in middle age or even older folk that are dealing.
Right. I think what I was thinking is to create a vision of it, and so it could be part of your something on the wall in your clinic, so you can always reference it.
Love it.
It's like, yes, I need to
That would be helpful.
enlist Stephen on that, because he's the artist between us two. He's an amazing artist. Yeah, he does calligraphy and all kinds of stuff.
That's right, he is. All right, let's get him to work on that. Yeah. Okay, that's cool and helpful. This is one of the things I love about Chinese medicine is we have different ways of looking and thinking about regulating physiology.
Absolutely.
And it's never quite done. There's usually something from some perspective where you can get a handle on things and take things forward. I want to come back for a moment to like the ADD and ADHD. We talked at the beginning of this conversation about one of the problems for many things, not just these attentional issues, but immune system regulation and all that, is that there's been an upregulation
Right.
of the nervous system, of the immune system, of like everything, beginning with formula, as you were saying.
Right.
So now someone's a teenager, or a young adult for that matter. But let's stick with teenagers for a moment, because look, if you can make it through being a teenager and not have to be medicated, I suspect you're going to have a better go as a young adult in terms of regulating your emotions, right? And if you end up on medication as a teenager for whatever reason,
That's for sure. Yes.
my suspicion is it's going to be very hard to get off of that for the rest of your life, because there are fundamental developmental opportunities that you don't get to do because you're medicated.
Yeah, and I think there's a bigger issue that you're bringing up, especially with the medication, is first thing, it starts at the beginning, because I think one of the issues that ADD and ADHD always brings to me is that I think there's two aspects to these kinds of children. One is that actually it is part of development. So their maturity causes their inability to pay attention to what they're there. It's not that they don't have the actual ability, but they're just not there at the time. So we have a structured way of, movement through time, right? So we at 6 years old, we're in kindergarten. At 7 years old, we start first grade. At 8 years old, we start eighth grade, and so on and so forth, right? So, but it's all by number, right? It's not negotiable. I mean, it's not very negotiable. And if it is negotiable, it's usually in the more severe cases where people are found to be not appropriate for that age. But I think a lot of times children are being diagnosed with ADD and ADHD not because they are, because they're not mature enough. So their development is not there. So the first question we always, especially in younger kids, is this really ADD or ADHD from development, or is it physiological? Is it actually physiological? The basic question that I usually ask, is it consistent? Because a lot of times you'll see that ADD and ADHD is not consistent. It happens at school, or it happens at home, or it happens in certain situations and not in others. That usually points towards that there could be some developmental issue where it's not consistent, it's not always there. So that's number one. And a lot of times these children get medicated not because they have physiological issues that are causing the difficulties, but just because they're not mature enough. They're not in the right place at the right time. And so it's very important to explain that to parents, because I think that really can change. If parents understand that, they can interact or intervene or work throughout not medicating rather than medicating. The other concern is that in reality, medications, especially stimulants, Adderall or different stimulants that help in focus and concentration, cause better performance. And I don't know if you know it, but especially college kids now, even if you don't have ADD and ADHD, you're on Adderall to kind of get better grades.
Yes, I've heard that.
Yeah. So there's another layer of this kind of a race that we're all the kids are put into this race. There was a term, it was called the race to nowhere, right? It's a race to nowhere because it doesn't necessarily bring you more happiness or whatever, or financial gains or anything like that. But everybody's in a race to get your kid to the best college. And I don't know how where you live, it's there, but New York City, everybody's in the rat race.
Same here.
They have kids in kindergarten need to go for testing to see if they can get accepted to the kindergarten.
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about elementary even, it's like pre-K. So I think there's a
Remember when we were kids, the idea was to not be in the rat race?
yes, exactly. Do you remember that game?
But yeah, this really fits with the theme that you brought up earlier, Moshe, that there's this hyperstimulation, and it does not sound like it's avoidable. We're all caught up in it.
It's very difficult to avoid, yes.
So given that we're caught up in it, it's the air we breathe, it's the soup that we swim in.
Yes.
What can we do as parents, or what can we do as practitioners, or what could we just do for ourselves so we sleep better at night to mitigate this? Because it's not going away.
Right.
The screens are not going away. I don't want my screen to go away. My screen helps me run my business, both of them.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Right? In fact, it allows me to run two businesses. Lucky me.
Right.
It's a marvelous tool. It's a miraculous tool.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
And how can we mitigate this?
I think, one of the things that we need to help our patients and ourselves to is create a structure where there is times or downtimes, times that we, that brings, my thought sends me to this. I don't know if you've ever heard of Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And
Yes, of course.
one of the 7 habits is learn to say no.
I have a little problem with that.
Yeah, exactly. We all have, because we're all trying to do everything, but we have to know where the limits is. And that's something we need to teach kids from the get-go. It's like, you need to learn how to say no to things that you really want, but they're an overstretch of what your energy allows you.
Mm-hmm. And I suspect that parents could model that for their kids by also backing up a little bit.
Right. Yeah. And another thing that we should really focus on teaching kids is delayed gratification, it's called, I think, as opposed to instant gratification, right?
The marshmallow test. Yeah.
It's to overcome the need for instant gratification. If you want something, you should be able to say, okay, wait a second, right? And you don't need it right away. You can wait a minute. So that's a huge thing. And there's all these. I don't know if you know of this. There was this study that showed that they followed children who, I think they gave them a candy, and they said, you can have a candy now, or if you wait and keep this candy for, I can't remember, 5 minutes or so, then you'll actually get 2.
Yep, that's right. It actually was marshmallows.
Marshmallows, right.
I think they did it at Stanford. And yes, it's remarkable. The kids that could wait and get 2, they follow them into adulthood. They do markedly better than the kids that would eat the marshmallow.
Yes. So that ability to understand that you don't need to immediately get what you want, right? It's you have to sort of look at the long run and be able to see forward looking, in a sense, right? And our whole society is about instant gratification. It's like, okay, I have hypertension because I love to eat donuts. So here's a pill so you can continue instantly enjoying the donuts and you continue eating that, and you don't have to stop it, right? So you can immediately, instead of saying, okay, I need to not have that. That wasn't a great example so much, but you understand what I'm saying, right?
I totally get it. It's a fine example. And again, it's looking at this, how can we take a system that's on overload and overstimulated and downregulate it in some way?
Right.
There's a really old way that comes from very traditional cultures, religions, like the religions I grew up with, a Sabbath day, A day a week, you don't do. A day a week, you just put it down. Now, you can really fetishize it, like, well, I can't even turn on my lights, right? I mean, you can go to extremes, but the core of that kind of a practice is pause. Just bring it down. Have a day with your family. Walk in nature. Don't do. Create some yin.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, it's important to, I think, somehow put that into the tradition of your family, right? It could be a certain meal during the week that you sit down and you just no phones, no nothing, just sitting and being. And there may be resistance, but it has to be observed. That's part of rituals, right?
It's part of ritual. And of course, there's some resistance. And part of the complaining about it is what makes it sort of fun. And that way the kids 10, 20 years later can look back on it and go, oh, yeah, remember how we hated that?
Yes.
Man, that was great.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Like we're doing, I had that for my family. It was like a nightmare every Friday night. We had to be at home, and no matter what, for Friday dinner, it was like there's no questions asked. There's no excuses.
That's right. There's no questions that you can invite your friend. Oh, you want to go out with your friend? That's cool. You can invite them to Shabbat dinner. That's fine.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. You're not going anywhere else. It's something.
Right. But you're here.
And it was sacred, right? Sacred.
Yeah.
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 And I think it's it's something that we need, families need to create. It's important, and it's not happening enough because parents end up working late, so they don't have dinner at a certain. The family doesn't meet at dinners on a regular basis, and then it gets forgotten, and it's just like everybody eats whenever. And actually, that's part of what might weaken the spleen, because the spleen loves that regularity of timing of meals, and the process of eating together. The togetherness is earth.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
It's how we build earth, right? So that's if we don't have that, then the earth is not developing.
I'm thinking too about the role of ritual as a very earth-based practice.
Right. The rituals are not only earth. They're also supports fire, right? Fire, emperor is about ritual, doing the right thing at the right time. And the metal, it's about structure, right? Metal is about structure, and having rituals is a structure. It's something that creates structure in your life, right? Rituals are part of structure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So ritual actually runs through and can touch all of the phases.
Through a few, but especially things around eating, right? That's earth. That's no doubt that anything around eating is about earth, strengthening the earth.
I remember reading something or hearing something. I think it was from Kevin Kelly, who's kind of a savant that I like to follow. And he was talking about the importance in raising children of having some kind of ritual that you all do together. It could be something really silly, like watching a certain show at a certain time.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Or it could be like, a Shabbat dinner. Or it could be,
a hike on certain day, or going to the community garden and working in the garden.
Right. Or you take a vacation at a certain time together. That creating these rituals, creating something that's like, this is what we do together. It gives a kind of safety. It gives a kind of balance. It gives a structure to who we are together. You know who you belong to when you do something together with somebody.
Right. Absolutely. Right. And the interesting thing is that when we grow up, we need that. We also need to know the not borders, the keeping. So that parents need to be very clear on what the rules are, and so children need rules. They need rules to grow up, and that's part of how they develop. It creates a structure of development in the same way that rituals do. So if parents are not very good at keeping the borders right, or it's clear what they can do or they cannot do, that affects the child's development. Especially it affects the wood element, but in a sense it can affect all the elements through that. So that is part of the needs, right? So I think when you think of creating or growing a child in a harmonious way, there needs to be rituals, there needs to be consistency in feeding times and in making food together as part of that. There needs to be also clear definitions of what's allowed and what's not allowed. And that's part, those are really important, sort of like real basic ideas that need to be. I don't know, another person that I listen a lot to is Adler. Adler, I think it's Alfred Adler. He was he was the
He was a psychotherapist. Yeah.
Psychologist. He was a student of Freud.
Yes.
And he developed he recognized that the fabric of society is changing, and that parents, which used to be an authoritative figure, they were your authority, they were not your friend. Parents were not your friends. And
that's very different than today.
Right. And today but he noticed that shift, that he called it that the families are becoming much more democratic because everybody could say whatever they want. I don't know, I already had a little more liberty, but I know that my parents talk about that you would never speak to your parents. You would say yes or no, but nothing. You wouldn't really, it wasn't something, you do. And the parents, they were sort of like an authority, and they created the structure of what's allowed and what's not allowed. But nowadays, this is, so he developed an idea of how to grow a child emotionally healthy in a democratic sort of society. And he said one of the things that parents, we don't learn how to be parents anywhere. So he developed these parenting school. It's called the Adlerian parenting schools. And usually they're a group of parents that meet together. There's a guide that he's the one who's did some learning on how to do that. And you learn as a group of parents about the ideas of parenting in this kind of society, of how to manage rearing of children in these days.
It sounds very metal-like.
Yes.
It sounds very, very metal-like.
It's more, yes, yeah.
Which, of course, can be very useful if you got a whole bunch of wood. Right?
Yes, I know. If your child is wood, right, and you are earth, that's a problem, right? Because then if you're earth, you don't like to give rules, and things are kind of flowing and they're not very clear cut because they, I will manage, you kind of, but if you have a wood pushy child, then that could be a huge problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Or vice versa, but yeah.
Well, again, this is where looking at things like the 5 phases.
Yes.
Is so useful because we can look and see what's happening in any given moment or situation, evaluate, there's too much fire, there's not enough water, there's too much wood, whatever it is.
Right.
And then we have a couple of solutions, right?
Absolutely.
You got the Ke cycle, you got the Sheng cycle, you can tonify the control, you can disperse the mother, there's all kinds of things that we can do.
Right. And I think I use that a lot in my children. So I sort of identify this is what element is that child? What is the mother? What is the father? And then what is the dynamic? And it really, if you explain that to the parents, they suddenly can manage their kids much better because they understand that.
Yeah. You know what? I'm just thinking this is the Chinese version of family systems therapy.
Right. Absolutely. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, Moshe, we usually go for an hour, but what can I say?
Oh, it was too much fun.
Too much fun. We're going to have to come back and discuss some more of this at some point.
Yes, absolutely. Would love to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Before we close, though, again, because I'm so on this upregulated thing, we've talked about a number of things that'll help to downregulate, right? The ritual, meals together, maybe being a little more metal in a democratic sort of world.
Right.
Anything else to pay attention to that would help folks to settle down?
Yes, I think one thing I want to point parents, and ourselves is, it's it's a kind of popular now. It's mindfulness, right? The idea of mindfulness, which is basically some kind of meditation or Tai Chi or, I talk to this about parents of how to do Qigong exercises and Tai Chi exercises to down-regulate. This is actually, I think meditation is amazing, and some kids can do meditation, but others have more of a difficulty, especially ones that need movement. Tai Chi is amazing, but it can also be yoga. But any movement meditation is something that I try to point parents towards and figure out how to kind of have their kids do that, because I think it's...
My parents were masters of this.
Yes.
Here's what they did. They said, go outside, play. You know what time to be home for dinner. Get out of here.
Yes. That's the old style. Yes. And it worked well for a long time, but I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it really did. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, this has been delightful.
Amazing. Yes. Here too.
I look forward to the next time we sit down together.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, that wraps things up with Moshe. One of my takeaways from this conversation today is how childhood development is not a straight path, but a spiral. And while any moment might seem chaotic or emergent, the great spirals of development are a reliable structure that brings different developmental challenges in their appropriate season. Moshe's insights into how early experience shapes lifelong health are a reminder that the roots of resilience, they start early. I loved his perspective on the power of boredom, how it creates space for creativity and emotional regulation. If there's one takeaway, it's that healing and development are a potent mix of chaos and structure. For more on treating kids, visit the very first episode of Physiological with David Miller, where he discusses treating recurrent ear infections in children. There's also episode 256 with Rebecca Avern on magic and emergence, treating teenagers. And in episode 29, we talk with Robin Ray Green on treating children through the 5 elements. There's plenty in the back catalog. Head over to the website and have a browse around. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Physiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Physiological.